Round number 12 is in the books for the FIDE Candidates 2022 tournament. We now have a battle for second place going on because if Magnus Carlsen does not choose to compete in the next World Championship, we have the first place against the second place finisher from the candidates facing off against each other. So the first game to finish today was our leader, Jan Nepomniachtchi, against Hikaru Nakamura, who is still in the hunt for second, and even a slight possibility of tying for first. So let's see what happens in this one. See e4 by Jan, e5, knight f3, knight c6. We get a Roy Lopez with an attempt to go into the Berlin again by Hikaru Nakamura. He's one of the world's leading experts, if not the leading expert in the Berlin defense. And after these trades, we see d takes e, followed by knight takes b5, a bit of a sideline here instead of taking on c6. And this is known theory with a4, the knight moves here, these knights trade in d5. This is known theory, and it's a known draw line. After the trade, we have check, queen back. The players agree to a draw, 0.00. I'm wearing my famous t-shirt today. Want to play chess? These players did not want to play chess today. They had no interest playing for a game. They shake hands and agree to a draw. So that almost secures the victory for Jan. He only needs one more draw to secure first place. So it's pretty much in his hands. He's got a 99.9% chance to win the tournament after today's round. Next game to finish was Ding Liren against Timur Radjabov. Let's see if Ding Liren can get a win that could pull him back closer to Nepomniachtchi or maybe secure him the second place. We see a Nimzo Indian, and Ding has had a little bit of trouble against Radjabov in the past, and Radjabov mentioned that in the post-game interview. So what Ding is doing here is he's going for this kingside expansion plan, and he wants to play for a win. Radjabov plays a bit of a sideline with knight to a6, and for whatever reason, it's a higher level than I can understand, but this f3 g4 plan does not work so well against this knight a6 sideline. So the problem now is Ding Liren's trying to figure out which plan to go for, and he mixes up his moves a little bit coming up. c5 by Radjabov, capture on a6, capture on c5, and now we get this imbalance, bishop pair for black, knight and bishop for white, but we have very ugly pawns for black, materials equal. So Ding looks solid here. Seems like he has some good chances still to play for the win. Can blockade this isolated pawn with knight to d4. But coming up here, there's going to be a big mistake. Okay, rook to d2. This is a minor mistake. What he should play here is bishop to a1. There's a tactical shot coming up, and I think Ding Liren misses it. So he plays rook to d2, queen to c8. Kind of a sneaky move. He's looking at the queen lined up on the c file in combination with the rook lined up on the b file. Keep in mind that king is still on e1. King safety problems for Ding Liren. He plays pawn to f3. I really don't understand this move. I think he's afraid of castling because the bishop takes h3. So instead he plays f3, and he's either going to play king to f2 or castle, and this pawn will help defend g4. But now rook to e8 played, pressuring this pawn. And after king to f2, trying to guard it, we see a great move, queen to b8. It's double attacking this bishop, which is defended twice. And it's also threatening bishop to g3 check. And after queen to c1, there's an amazing tactical shot here. A chess.com brilliant move by Radjabov. Rook takes e3. We see a -9 eval. So instead of queen to c1, probably bishop to c1 is the best move, or knight to d1 defending this pawn. Queen to c1 allows this tactic. And let's just see what happens. If the king takes on e3, there's bishop to c5 check, which also covers this square. And if knight to d4, the queen comes out to e5 with check. Take on d4 with check. This position is completely falling apart. Knight h5, coming into g3. And here white has to sacrifice. This position is already +1 on material for black. It's a +9 stockfish eval for black. So a -9 eval. So knight to d1 was played instead. Rook goes back, knight to e3. Rook to b3, double attacking this knight. So white is on the defensive. Bishop takes. Rook to c8, attacking the queen. Queen's tied down to this guy. And after queen a1, there's bishop to f4. What a nice finish. A lot of tactics here. If knight takes f4, we have queen takes f4, or even knight to e4 check. That's a cool move. So this position is just completely getting blown apart for white. This is a fork of king and rook. If pawn takes, queen can take f4. This is a forced checkmate in 9 moves. So at this point, after bishop to f4, white just had to resign. There was nowhere to put the rook, which was trying to defend the bishop. So Ding-Liren gets knocked down 1 point, and Timur Radjabov is back in the picture for 2nd place. And we're going to look at those standings coming up after the 4 games. So game number 3, Jan-Krzysztof Duda against Firouzja. We see this sort of semi-Slav structure for black, very solid. And this is all super common stuff. Take on c4, play b5. Now we get this imbalance where white gets the big center. Black has the queen side expansion. Still pretty standard. Thematic break for black, playing e5, trading off one of white's center pawns. h3, watching for any sort of Greek gift tactics. Bishop takes, knight here, queen comes out. And the position here is just about equal, 0.16. And now we see b4 by Alireza. A great move according to chess.com, offering up some trades, getting ready to capture on c3. And this was kind of a bad bishop on a6 for Alireza, blocked in by the b pawn. So this is a tactical way to get that bishop traded off the board. All right, so now after this exchange, we see +1 material for Alireza, but white does have the bishop pair and a rook on the open file. So this is approximately balanced according to the engine. And now we see this brilliant move, bishop to c5, skewering the queen to the rook. And the problem is black can't take this bishop with the queen because there's bishop takes f7 check, winning the queen. The queen moves, and JKD is able to get the exchange on f8 and finds f4. What a move. So f4 is a good move because after takes, bishop takes, which happened in the game, Duda is able to take b2, getting rid of that pesky pawn that was 1 square from queening. And look at how open the black king is with the queen on the long diagonal. And you can just sense that one of these rooks is going to be on the g file very soon. Knight h5 by Alireza. This is a mistake. The best move is bishop back to e5, trying to fight against the queen on this long diagonal. Now we see rook to d3. A nice rook lift, guarding the g3 square, and also hoping to maybe come to the g file eventually. Rook f2, blunder by Duda. This is Duda's largest advantage so far. He's up 4.4. He has 33 minutes on the clock to make 14 moves, so plenty of time. He needs to find bishop to a2. That's one option to still hold the win, or king to h1. And I think the idea with both moves is we want to bring the queen over here and get the queen on the g file eventually. King h1 also prepares rook to g1, which makes a lot of sense to me. That's actually probably the most straightforward. King h1, and let's try to get rook to g1. Rook to f2 does not quite work after this maneuver. Bishop e5, queen e2, and knight to f4 would equalize the position. Alireza returns the favor. He misses this tactic. He does not find knight to f4. It's a little bit scary because after knight f4, there is queen to g4 check. Force this king to move. Rook to d7. The computer says I can actually take a3 and hold the draw in this position. But I understand why, from a human perspective, not so easy to find knight to f4. Knight f6 played, king h1, king h8, rook g2, getting the rook on the open file. Now drops the bishop back. And at this point, we're looking at a 3.3 advantage. Queen to g5 probably coming soon. This is an endgame that Duda could also probably convert, being up the exchange for a pawn. So he's holding this 3-point advantage, putting the pieces on good squares. And now we see queen takes e4. I think this might be the moment where Duda should try something different. Maybe rook to e2, just holding that pawn temporarily, and then go for rook g1. because after Alireza wins that e pawn in exchange for the f pawn, there's knight to g3 check. So Duda really can't safely take this pawn. He needs to move the rook, meaning that Alireza now has 2 pawns for the exchange, and that decreases Duda's winning chances by quite a bit. So Duda felt he had to play for this pawn, but after knight to g3 check, the engine says it's completely equal. Rook comes to b2, hitting that bishop. So this rook trade happens. Bishop to d4 check. And now those pieces trade off. Opposite colored bishops, 1 pawn up for Alireza. This is a dead draw. So these guys agree to a draw. The 4th game, we have Richard Rapport against Fabiano Caruana. And Fabi plays pretty aggressively in this game. We see a king pawn opening. I think Fabi wants to play for the win here. Plays f6. This opens up the light squares a little bit, but there's no light square bishop for white. And this is an interesting point. Both sides are trying to figure out which way do I castle, king side or queen side. It's kind of a waiting game, and Rapport keeps pushing this h pawn up the board, which makes you think he's going to castle queen side. So Fabiano says, I'm not going towards that h pawn, even though it might be a little bit better to delay castling here. We're only looking at half a pawn difference. Now we see this trade, and the imbalance now is bishop against knight. 8 pawns each. Pawns on different files, but pretty symmetric. All right, this is pretty equal, around point 4. After bishop takes f4 check, the king moves. You can kind of sense that this trade could happen at any moment. And with the kings fairly safe, it's pretty difficult for both sides to play for a win. So now things get a little bit spicy here. g5, not capturing the pawn back on f5. And pieces are hanging all over the place. But after the dust settles, we get to this position. 2 rooks for black, 1 rook for white, but a pawn sitting on e7. This is just craziness. These players aren't agreeing to a quick draw. Rook to d4, e5 is played, and the rook gets traded back. But now we're in a position where white is up only 1 pawn, and it can be captured immediately, and that gets played. This now is just a very equal endgame. We're at move 35. They go to move 52, and neither side is able to play for the win. Okay, so what does this mean in terms of the results? I have here the results with the tie breaks. Let me make it a little bit bigger. We have Nepomniachtchi leading with 8.5 points. Hikaru Nakamura in second, 6.5 points. And this is going to matter. Tiebreak 1. So tiebreak 1 is what's called the Sonneborn Burger tiebreak. It's based on getting 1 point for every point that your opponent scores if you beat them. And if you draw against them, it's like half of their score and you sum it all up. So the idea is you do better against players that are higher in the field, you get a higher tiebreak. With a round robin, it's going to be very similar depending on your score. So the more points you score, the higher this tiebreak will be. But currently, Hikaru Nakamura is tied with Dingleren, and he has the higher tiebreak 1. So this is going to matter. And then you see we have this other tie, half a point behind Nakamura and Dingleren, between Radjabov and Caruana. They're very close on tiebreak 1, slight lead for Radjabov. So let's see, how does this affect the odds going forward? This is the odds for second place chart. Nakamura springs into the lead after Dingleren's loss, even though Nakamura drew. He's at 42%, Dingleren 41%. Caruana goes up slightly to 12%, and Radjabov with the win. He's back in the hunt for second place, 6% chance. And look up here. This is to win first place, 99.9% chance for Jan. So that's the recap of round 12. Check out some links in the description below. Our opening courses are on sale during the candidates, 25% off. And I will see you for the next round's recap.